I wanted to say one other thing, and I'll share the tip with you as well as part of this. But like one thing that as leaders we do, and sometimes we measure ourselves or we're measured against this is good leaders, great leaders know how to build high performing teams.
Hey, welcome to Leadership Loading Podcast. I'm Jason McClaren.
Hey, Jason, Jimmy Malik.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks, Jimmy, for coming on the show today. So Jimmy's coming to us from Austin, Texas, and he is a leadership coach and strategist. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But Jimmy, tell us about your background. What led you to where you're at today?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me on. So with my story or my start, really, leadership kind of came into my life at a very early age. So I'm the eldest of three in a first generation ethnic household. So when you're the eldest, you basically get called up to lead even before you're ready. And that's exactly what happened in my case. So dealing with adult level adversity when you're a teenager, holding down two jobs while I'm going to college and helping my dad launch his retail business. Um, a lot of that just sort of taught me at an early age, like, enabling potential through persistence, being able to deal with that adversity, learning to be more disciplined at an early age. And then, just from there, when I got into the professional world, I'm actually from the Washington, D.C. area. So I jumped right into the government contracting space, and which was nice because, you get a lot of people who are ex-military or ex-civilian government folks that are coming onto the consulting side, and there's a very clear leadership style hierarchical. Everybody kind of knows what they do and what they need to do, and everybody kind of like understands that. And then from there on, went over to consulting, global consulting, learned a lot about leadership across cultures, launching projects in Africa and Europe, and then ended up in the big tech arena. I was at Meta for a while, and that's where leadership adversity kind of hit me like a ton of bricks.
Right. And so tell us about that. At Meta, how did you fall into leadership adversity there?
Yeah, I joined Meta as more of a senior person, and what I realized right away was I was like an older millennial now working with mostly younger millennials. So going from GovCon, which is more baby boomer Gen X, to this younger millennial and Gen Z, very different group of people. They respond differently in a leadership setting. And so I was tasked with a global initiative that impacted 35 countries, had an international team, project team. They gave me the Meta playbook for project managers, which is basically it's all about impact and getting what you need to make the project successful. And so I followed that playbook, tight controls, clear hierarchy, and in a matter of weeks, the project was in chaos, and conflict erupted. I wasn't getting any responses from my team members. And so it was like that was a moment, you either break down or break through. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I broke down and it was really difficult. And then I started to think about one of my old mentors and what he taught me. And he said, you got to care for the people that you're in charge of. And so I started to think about that, and I shifted my approach to a connection first leadership, which means that you take extreme ownership of everything going wrong as the leader. I showed up with vulnerability with my team members, scheduled one-on-ones, and let everybody know, hey, look, I screwed up. I wasn't doing it the right way. What can I do to be a better leader? How can I support you? And so really approached it as a partnership style of leadership, and that really resonated with the different team members. Everybody got re-engaged. Project was back on track. And I just learned very through this experience that, man, like if you connect with people first, everything else takes care of itself. So I really sort of that's my approach to leadership, is the connection first approach.
So you come from the software side. I think a lot of people think that software engineers or project managers in the software sector are very introverted. So are you an introvert? And if you are, how do you leverage that in your leadership style?
Yeah, that's really good. I do I guess self-identify as more of an introvert, and so generally, just being a leader in for large teams it's a really difficult thing for an introvert to do because they're just not naturally outwardly engaging, right? And so the way to the way I find that you can get around that or overcome that is really connect with people one on one, right? And so when you kick off a new project or you take over a project or a leadership role, spend time getting to know people one on one. And when you build those really authentic relationships and you share about yourself and people open up to you, then you've got that connection. And then when you put everybody back together, you have more of a solid environment for you to lead because everybody's connected with you in some way, and now they're connecting with each other through you. So then you feel less about the pressure of being an introvert, and everybody kind of starts engaging you. You have the extroverts engage the introverts, and vice versa, and then it just becomes a very like connected group.
That's good. Yeah, I think I started off as an Air Force firefighter. You can't be an introvert, even though I was an introvert. I kind of have evolved into, like, I guess they call it omnivert. I'm mostly introverted, but I know when to extrovert when I need to. So when I go to networking events or when I'm doing my leadership stuff, also, um, I can turn on the charm, I guess you call it, and then
Mhm.
and go from there. So, all right. So, what are you doing now? What's going on with your leadership coaching?
Yeah, so through that meta experience, started to expand that sort of connection first approach with other colleagues. And what that led to was a lot of colleagues that were not on my projects or my team were starting to resonate with this approach and said, it started to be like, hey, Jimmy, you have 15 minutes. Can we talk? I have something on my mind. And those chats started to be regular sessions. And then I started to realize my passion for coaching and helping people understand how to lead yourself, and then to lead others. And so that kind of took me down this path of, okay, I wanted to really get out there and really impact the next generation of leaders. So, like I said, I was working with younger millennials and Gen Z, and I started to realize these folks grew up differently than maybe you and I and our parents. It's just they grew up behind a screen. I mean, they're ultra introverted, and so helping them be better leaders to connect with their colleagues and people they lead. So that's been my mission. Currently, so I'll tell you a quick story. Working with a COO for a nonprofit, and we've been working together for a while, and she's having some problems with she's had some problems with her CEO. Her CEO has a very authoritative leadership style, right? So she's very much like she likes to stretch the team, shoot for the moon, very typical CEO, which is fine as long as you go about it in the right way. So my client, the COO, she's got a servant leadership style. And so what was happening was that her CEO kept pushing to do things and she was in conflict with that. And she ended up doing it her CEO's way. And then she lost talent. People left the company. There was trust issues. The work was piling up, and she just didn't know what to do. And we talked about an approach, and the connection first approach really was, you know, let's let's maybe dig deeper with the CEO, have some conversations outside the office, go on a walk, talk to her about, her life and things like that. So she, through that, found out that her CEO had been diagnosed with breast cancer. And she was dealing with this like thing outside her day job that was affecting who she was. And that brought them closer together. There was a lot of trust that was built up. And then she was able to influence positive change and let the CEO kind of just, take her hands off the wheel and let the COO basically run the organization while the CEO was dealing with this major health problem. And that really turned things around for her. So what we learned from that experience is that you may have one leadership style and someone you work for has a different leadership style. And how do you reconcile that? And where do you meet in the middle? And so, being able to connect on a deeper level really opened things up. There was a lot of vulnerability and trust that went into that.
And I think coming from the military side, we're very authoritative, and you leave your feelings at the door. Like, and you see this in movies, military movies are like, once you get to the job, leave your life at home. And the old joke, if the military wanted you to have a family, they would have issued you one, all those things.
Yeah.
So I took that, when I came in the civilian sector, I did a lot of that where I was just like, work is work and home is home. And so I had a lot of stuff going on at home where I didn't bring it to work, but I did interact with my work. And so I think we need to break that barrier down that, if something, yeah, we don't want you coming to work every day complaining about your home life, but things like that that are affecting your leadership thoughts and that sort of thing, Yeah, bring that up
Yeah.
with your one-on-ones. That way you can figure out a solution, right? Maybe it's a modified work schedule, or maybe it's a FMLA type thing where you're taking off what you need.
Hmm.
That's why these programs have been developed over the years. We have FMLA, we have bereavement
Yeah.
leave, we have all these things that you can do. I know when my dad passed away, I didn't know that we had, I forget how many days it was, but I only took like 3 days off of work. And I had to drive. It took me a day to
Yeah.
drive to where he was at, a day for the funeral, and I drove home the third day. But that military mindset in me was like, I need to get back to work. I need to get back to work. And I think part of it was the grieving process where if I'm at work, then I don't have to think about it. Right. So,
Yeah.
I lost 4 days of my bereavement leave I could have taken just because I, didn't talk to my leader about it.
Yeah, man, that's absolutely right. And Jason, first decade of my career, I really was in that GovCon space, and a lot of folks transitioning from, military, or even like other high government roles into civilian or commercial. And that was one thing that I noticed too, is that you have to create an environment of psychological safety for your team. You don't have to get to know everybody and everything that's going on with them, only what they feel comfortable sharing. But if you create a space of psychological safety, what that does is that lets people feel comfortable coming to you when they have a problem. Even if they have a problem with their work, they'll come to you and talk to you about that in a way that they won't feel like they're going to be punished or judged. And so it's about creating that environment, right? And I think that's probably the transition when you move over from maybe more of an authoritative military background, where it's a very clear pecking order, right? And you understand your role, and everybody kind of falls in line, and you do the things that need to be done. But then you come in commercial and civilian, and now you're again dealing with a whole different generation of people, right? I think that's the other part of this whole thing, is that if even if you're military, you're coming back and you're dealing with a Gen Z person, for instance, they shut down, man. They just don't. Adversity is not something they grew up with like you and I did, or anybody in the military space. Um, they shut down. So you have to approach that differently to kind of get them engaged and open up.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Jimmy. So if you met a new leader, or maybe you're on a call with a new guy that wants to join your coaching, what would be your one tip for them?
Yeah. So I wanted to say one other thing, and I'll share the tip with you as well as part of this. But like one thing that as leaders we do, and sometimes we measure ourselves or we're measured against this, is good leaders, great leaders know how to build high performing teams, right? That's a concept that's universally understood. And I think, it's great that if you want to strive for that. I've kind of taken that a step further, right? Instead of saying I'm going to build a high performing team, which really means me as a leader, as the architect of that team. It's a project focused mission for this high performing team to work together to deliver something. So I'm actually, what I learned again through my meta experience is that I want to enable high functioning humans. And let me kind of explain what that means, right? And everybody has a floor and a ceiling of how they function, how they can function, right? And if you're in a fear state of mind, you don't feel safe, you don't feel supported, you function closer to that floor. And how do you get people from the floor to the ceiling of their full potential? So I had a guy on my team in an ops role, and he was doing a very simple role, and really, really nice guy, very quiet. I met with him. His name's Peter, and I started talking to Peter. I said, Peter, tell me about your background, so on and so forth. And Peter was a Cornell, found out he was a Cornell grad. He had a passion for data science. He was on the crew team, very highly motivated individual. And I said, Peter, I actually have some analysis on this project that you're not doing, but I'd love to get your take on it. I think we have some blind spots. He took that on, and he was able to find some areas that we were really deficient in before they became a problem. So we addressed all that. So at the end, the result was Peter helped the team. He was high functioning on the team to his full potential. He felt fulfilled, and then he was able to do data work on a team where he wasn't qualified to do it. No one said you need to do this, and then he was able to roll that into a new role where he was more of a data scientist. So it really was a great story showing how you can find people's hidden talents and then really help them elevate their level. So so I guess the tip for your audience would be, I would say lead with vulnerability. So if you're a leader, show up vulnerable, talk, let the team know where your growth areas are, where your limitations are as a leader, and commit to growing. That will inspire the team to follow suit. Get to know your people one-on-one. That will uncover things like hidden talents in the case of Peter. And then transform through connection, right? So show up with empathy, mirror listening, which is really you're mirroring the person and their tone and their language, so they feel seen and heard. And then open-ended questions, right? So asking open-ended questions. So a classic one that we as leaders or managers will ask is like, when you're in a one-on-one with someone, they're talking about their work, and you're like, okay, how can I help with this, right? And that's a very normal way to talk to people, and it's you typically get a reflexive answer like, no, I'm good, or some other short answer, and what it does is it creates this sense of like you're putting it on the other person to figure out what help looks like, and for them, to be able to say they need help may be like, okay, it's a sign of weakness or they don't know what they're doing. So people are a little bit hesitant. Now, if you reframe that question to say, what does support from me look like for you on this project, right? That's a very specific way that you're framing that. And what you're doing is you're expressing it, and you're saying, we're partners here. This is a partnership with us. And then what that does is you're normalizing support as part of the process. So they feel like, this is part of the process. And it really helps them think about what support looks like for them. And then they come back with a very different way of giving a response. So I would say those are the sort of the tips and my philosophy for when I work with project teams.
Awesome. Jimmy, if people wanted to reach out to you, I see you have a QR code if you're on the screen, if you're watching the video. People can scan that, I'm guessing, or go to your website.
Yeah, absolutely. The QR code will take you to, it'll give you my LinkedIn and my other social media with a lot of content I put out there. And my website has all my contact info. So yeah, please reach out if you have any questions or would like to talk about leadership.
Good deal. Well, Jimmy, thanks for coming on the show.
Great. Thanks for having me, Jason.
Hey, everybody. This episode of the Leadership Loading Podcast was brought to you by Go Heroes Inc., goheroes.org. If you'd like to be a sponsor, go ahead and check out our website or email us, and we'll get you all the information you need.
There are thousands of leadership and management podcasts to choose from. We're glad you chose the Leadership Loading Podcast, a Go Heroes production. If you'd like to support Go Heroes Inc., visit www.goheroes.org. And with that, it's time to wrap up today's show. Thank you so much for listening. We sincerely hope you liked it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with your family and friends. Let's all grow together. Thanks for listening to the Leadership Loading Podcast. Leadership inspired.